Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Teach, Sleep, Repeat. My name is Dylan.
And my name is Mike, according to the Instagram story
Right, very quickly.
made.
With the people who are listening here, we had a lot of new listeners last week because of the thing that is Sophie Bartlett.
Oh,
yeah,
wonderful.
the wonderful woman
Sophie Bartlett.
that is Sophie Bartlett. So we got a lot of new listeners. Okay, so we're going to carry on milking that cow this week.
Okay? Hey, hang on. Calling Sophie a cow. That's horrible.
Don't do
That's you, that Sophie.
No, the metaphorical cow.
Unbelievable.
No. I'm milking the metaphorical cow that is a social media presence and the people should bring with her.
So taking advantage of Sophie is what you're saying. So
this is going
either way, horrible about Sophie. Not very nice.
That's all. Me and Sophie are bezies, all right? I don't know what you two are like.
No, we're bezies. Me and Sophie. She refers to me as her best friend.
Really?
On social media. Yeah.
That's awkward because she refers to me as her best friend.
Yeah, but that's in private.
Oh.
It's not real if it's not on social
Where does that
media.
leave me and you?
The same as always.
What?
Well, according to the kids at school,
Yeah.
complete enemies, right?
We'll come on to that story very shortly. But guys, do follow us on Spotify. Do follow us on Instagram, Teach, Sleep, Repeat Podcast. That's where you can get all the good stuff. We post random things. And that's what's Hayden referencing there, I think, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. I'm referencing.
Because what was the funny thing I did this week on our Instagram story?
On our Instagram story.
Oh, no, that's the big story from this week. I have binned Hayden off Instagram because for the grand reason of he does nothing.
I do nothing
He
for
does
it.
nothing.
You occasionally take pictures and videos of me, so I'm on it.
Yeah, what I'm doing there is milking that cow, and I am calling you a cow in this sense.
Yeah, all right. All right. But yeah, do check out Dylan's Instagram for our...
Yeah,
For our,
it's just a picture of me now.
podcast.
It's just a picture of me. I might put you... I said to you, and I made this deal.
Terrible picture, by the way.
If,
I keep meaning to say that.
thank you. If you...
So crap.
It's good to know. Those are your 3,000 followers on Instagram. So, if you post literally just 3 reels, right? Whenever you get to 3 reels, because you're currently on, let me just count, you're 0. So, if you ever get to 3 reels, I'll put you back in.
Okay, so I just have to post 3
You
reels
simply have to post 3 reels.
all together.
Yeah, literally ever. And I'm so confident you won't ever reach that we'll end up with just me.
We'll see about that.
Anyway, follow us on there, guys. Follow us on here. Share everything, and that's it for this week. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, just do our bidding and
do things. Anyway, very quickly, let's catch up then before we do go into part 2 of our chat with Sophie.
Yes.
We'll summarise later what that's all about. But Hayden, they're here to obviously hear about us.
Yeah, of course. Well, let's start with what we were referencing earlier with our banter at school.
Yeah.
Because what was it the kids said to you the other day? They asked if we were actually friends.
Yeah. So okay. I'll start with my story then,
Yeah, go on.
because it's the context that's needed, I think. We had parents' evening, this week. So lots of people this week had parents' evening, the last week before Easter holidays. And when it's parents' evening, straight after school, and we have an extremely long day. We'll go into more detail in a second about parents' evening. I think all teachers in the land know that we very quickly decide that we're not doing any marking today. So what can I do with my lesson to try and change it so that there's nothing in the... we're going to work on paper today, kids. I've got some sugar paper out, some big A2 sugar paper. Nice. And I think I filed that under bin after the episode. The episode? I keep saying episode.
And you call episodes lessons as well.
It's not like me to mix my words up.
Wow.
I'm going to file that under bin. So went in the bin afterwards, but during it was actually really good because they still did maths, right? Whether or not it was in their book with a green tick next to it or in the dustbin, the point is they still did some maths.
Yeah.
We were doing fraction of a quantity, and I thought, what better way to engage the children than to make some counters, some homemade counters, not just boring old normal counters.
Can you guess what the counters were?
Was it your big round head? Yes, it was.
I think it was my favourite. And I happened to walk in the morning, just purely coincidentally, when just as he was making and printing them.
You almost came in, I was almost grinning and giggling to
Yeah,
myself.
I was a bit worried. I was like, "You're right."
I'm losing my mind.
So anyway, skip to parenting. So you use the counters of my face. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So use the counters of your face, and one of the children, whilst we were doing a question with your face, simply just very blasé went, are you Mr. Stephen's friends? Because I think she's getting the impression now after a while that we're either really good friends or I absolutely hate you. And she said, are you Mr. Stephen's friends? And I went, no, we're enemies. And I just carried on walking. Yeah. And she honestly didn't bat an eyelid. She went, okay. It's that one.
Makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, we're absolute enemies. So that was fun. We did 5, 6 of 12 of your head. They were sorting them out into 6 equal groups, 2 of you in each group, and then we were counting up 5 lots of them, 5 times 2. It was 10. It was fantastic.
Did it work? That's the main bit.
No, it didn't work at all. No, it didn't.
They were just completely distracted.
After Easter, we'll carry on. And all that happened was afterwards. I've got about, I'd say, close to 100 children in the school now who have a picture of you in their pocket.
Yeah, I know, because loads of them came up running up to me asking for my autograph on the back of those pictures of my head. So cheers for
I'll
that.
post it on Instagram, by the way, if anyone wants to see. And if you want that PDF of Hayden's head for your maths counters, I'm not even joking when I say, if you message us and ask me for it, I will email you.
No one's going to want the picture.
Listen, Hayden.
Yeah.
I don't know if you actually follow us on Instagram, because I have over 3,000 followers on Instagram now. So,
okay.
There must be someone out there who wants Hayden's head as counters. I'm sure.
Brilliant.
We hinted about Parents' Evening. Should we talk about it now, or do you have anything else?
Let's talk about Parents' Evening.
Go on then.
Okay, well, go on. Me.
Yeah.
Talk Parents' Evening.
I've had enough talking.
Parents' Evening was great. Mixed feelings as always. I actually love talking to parents. Genuinely love Parents' Evening. I just hate that it's on top of my work day. That's it. Always.
It's insane.
And schools do it differently. But I think it's pretty normal generally to have Parents' Evening in the evening after a full day of work, or in the best case scenario, after maybe like some schools will stop at lunchtime and then you start Parents' Evening then, or whatever it is. But either way, I was trying to think of a good analogy earlier, and it's like imagine doing meetings all day with 32 people in your meeting. They're children.
32 young adults, who are about the age of 8. Do you mean teaching, Aidan?
Yeah, teaching.
Are you doing an analogy where it's just teaching?
Just meetings, people that don't work in schools. Just imagine doing a meeting with loads of people, and then you do that all day, and at the end of it, you don't get a break, and it's now you've got to do one-to-one meetings for 6 more hours. It's so exhausting. And it's exhausting when in those last appointments, some of the parents go, "Oh, you look tired." And I'm like, I'm trying really hard not to. And I obviously look terrible.
I looked tired when I walked in this morning 15 hours ago.
Yeah. But I tell you what, just to summarize quickly, because it's boring, it was really nice. Yeah. And I had a lovely experience. All the parents were really, really lovely, as they always are anyway. And it was just a really good experience.
I do think the pros outweigh the cons. I think it's one of them things where you just get through it. Yeah, it's annoying, but two or three times a year you're gonna have to do it. You just have to get over it. I missed the first one because I was on paternity leave, and I was feeling really ill at the start of this week. I did a post on my Instagram about it, and I was just my temperature got up to 39.5 at the start of the week, and I woke up drenched, but insane. Like, I only felt bad for about, honestly, like that evening, and then after it, I was just tired. But the fever went. Anyway, I was like, I can't miss Parents' Evening, so I went home for PPA on Tuesday, just rested. That really helped. Got through it, and I'll say one big part, and we talked about job share in the last episode with Sophie. One big pro I've found is being able to bounce off each other a little bit, because when we do Parents' Evening, both myself and my job share are present, and we both talk, and it just that moment of being able to sit there and just collect my thoughts, look at my laptop whilst I know Amy's talking about English, for example. It makes the whole thing, I don't know, so much more easy to do, and I don't feel as burnt out by the end, because I remember doing Parents' Evening where it was me talking, trying to cram in 10 minutes, which is not enough to see one parent anyway.
No, not really, is it?
And then knowing that you're running late and you've got to immediately go to the next one and immediately go to the next one. I actually got mini breaks in between where we could kind of bounce off each other. So that to me is a really big perk of job share.
What was your timekeeping like this time?
Really good. And the only time it was bad was when parents just wouldn't shift or take the hint. You can't help that too much. And,
no.
There was one point where we were stood up, like very much finishing, and the conversation just carried on. And it was there's not much more you can do at that point other than go. And at one point I had to stand up and say, "I'm very sorry, I've got to go and grab these guys, I've been waiting too long." And that kind of, oh yeah, sure. I don't think anyone does it on purpose.
But it makes you feel rude, doesn't it? You don't feel, no one wants to say that. It makes you feel awkward, because they just want to talk about their kid, and you probably do want to talk about their kid. You just know that there's...
Can I tell you one story very quick about Parents' Evening?
Go for
because it really shocked me, myself and because we were sat there. We sit in like the shared area between classrooms, and in the classrooms, parents can go in and check the children's work. We get all their books out.
Yeah.
So before or after the appointment, in case they're running late, for example, they can just sit and read through their work. So that's fine. And opposite, so there's our classroom. We're in the shared area outside, and we share that area with a different classroom. And in that classroom, a child walked through. And Amy and I were just in between appointments. No one was around at the minute, so we were just waiting. And she stood at the door and she went, "I found a fish." And we were like, "Okay, yeah, no problem." And then she brought up her hands, like clasped together. and she's like, "Yeah, I found a fish. Isn't that really cool?"
How old is this kid roughly?
It must be be about 7, 8.
Okay, so quite young.
Yeah, so a young child. "I found a fish." And I was like, I hope it's a toy. I was like, And then she went, "No, look, it's moving." And then she came walking over, and I saw this black thing jump up. No. It was a fish because what had happened was
What?
in the pond outside in our nature reserve area.
No.
She'd gone and scooped up a fish, brought it in, and said, "Look, it's wriggling," and it was a wriggling live fish.
No.
Oh,
What did you do?
would you like to go? Well, I squirmed firstly, and I moved back because obviously she just wanted to show
unreal.
off. I just said, "Oh, would you mind going and putting that back?" Where,
I can't
oh
believe
yeah,
that.
okay. And she's like, it was nothing. Walk back, a live fish in it. I go, oh, I'm going to tick off my bingo for parents' evening. Live fish in hand of child.
I actually can't. Even though you've just told me that, I don't believe it.
What? I also still don't believe that actually happened to us in parents' evening.
Fish.
Live fish jumping around. I was like, won't be jumping for much longer though if you don't go and put it back really quickly.
Yeah, please do.
Absolutely
and also
crazy.
find your parents. I don't know, who are you? Oh my days. That's really funny.
Yeah. So that was one of them moments where, you know, you're in the rush of parents' evening and you only got like a split second down. Then the next person came in and it wasn't until afterwards. Amy turned to me and said, "Did that girl have a fish?" And I was like,
Yeah.
I think she had a fish.
Yeah, she did.
She did.
Anyway,
Unbelievable.
Then get back to it as
Yeah.
if you've not just dealt with that. That's brilliant. Well, I've got one little story that tickled me this week that might tickle you as well. So it was just after break, just starting the next lesson, and a girl in my class, very sensible, a lovely girl, and very trustworthy. Wouldn't say anything mean to anyone.
Just like Sophie.
Just like Sophie.
Yeah.
Just like Sophie. Yeah. She came up to me and
My best friend. So.
you're busy. And she said to me, "Oh, very worried, Mrs. Stevens. I hate to tell you, someone's written something in the girls' toilet on the back of the door." And I thought, here we go, year 6. This is the time where they start getting a bit like this. You know, like, I'm going to secondary school soon. Big for my boots, that kind of attitude. And I said, "Oh yeah, okay." I said, "Well, tell me what it was." And I was thinking, because you kind of get to that level of trust sometimes with kids, especially when they're a bit older, where it's like, I know we can't swear and things in school, but you can just whisper this to me. So for the sake of me having the information, I'm not going to tell you off, sort of thing. I said, "What was it?"
What is it? This. How dare you?
Get to the head teacher. I didn't write it, but just said it. And so I just sort of gave her that confidence and trust to be like, just tell me, because I need to know what it is, you know. And she didn't want to. She was like, "Oh, it's the B word." And I was like, "Oh, okay. What are we talking?" I'm thinking there's a couple of B words it could be. And I said, and she didn't want to tell me. And I just sort of whispered. I said, is it bitch? And I said the word to her. And she went, "No." And at this point, I was thinking, actually, what is it then? Yeah. I said, "Right, come here, just whisper it to me. Just tell me what it is." And she came right in and whispered to me, looked so worried at this point, thinking she's about to get in trouble. And she went, it's bum." Get out of here! Get to the head teacher's office for wasting my time.
I'm the same bum.
yeah. But that was it. I just thought, just so innocent.
Maybe say something like boo.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
The B word.
Bum.
The B word.
Bum. Honestly.
When they go to secondary school, they're going to have a brand new awakening, aren't they?
Yeah.
He said the B word. Yeah. It's like listing them off. Is it this?
See what you can find not written on the door at secondary school. Yeah, so that was quite funny. Anyway. Tickled me. Right. Oh. We're here to talk about. Talk to Sophie. I can't speak. We're here to talk for a start.
Go on, keep leading the podcast.
We're here to talk to Sophie. Guys, if you listened to last week, you'll notice that we finished the episode an hour in, halfway through our conversation. So we did split it into 2. So it will start a little bit abruptly after the jingle because we're just going to carry on playing you our conversation with Sophie last week. But we've got a bit of a focus this week, Dylan. What's our focus with Sophie?
Yeah, well, anyone who's been engaged with what Sophie posts online will know that she is an absolute expert when it comes to the Key Stage 2 SATs.
Yeah.
And we've had a lot of chat.
I know, because she's my best friend.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah. We've had a lot of chat over the last few weeks, I think, and in our podcast across this kind of whole journey, I guess, of Teach, Sleep, Repeat, of, you know, are SATs even relevant? Should we do the SATs? And well, we're doing them, so what's the best way to go about them? And Sophie brings fantastic insight into the breakdown of the SATs. We talk about, their effectiveness. And one of my favorite bits of discussion from this episode, which you really need to stick around and listen to, was the kind of chat that no one seems to want to have sometimes in public discourse, which is the breadth of cheating that goes on when it comes to these assessments. And, you know, we all know those schools. We look at their data and they get 97% across the board, reading, writing, and it's like, okay, well, I know your cohort and I'm not sure. And again, we're not going to sit here and individually look at anyone and say, well, you must be cheating. But let's be real for a second. It is an endemic thing where there's a lot of trust goes on in school. And we talk about that in depth. And that was really interesting to me. And I feel like sometimes as the non-year 6 teacher in the discussion, even though I'm best friends with Sophie, I felt like you and Sophie had a really nice chat. And my connection didn't help. And we're going to mention that in this one. Because
you're so laggy.
The first half last time was okay. This half, again, I just come in halfway through. So what do you think about the maths? And
So I was editing the conversation, and you honestly don't talk for like 15 minutes at one point. You just sat there like this.
Guys, gonna enjoy that. Make sure you watch the episode so you can watch me sit there like a little puppet waiting for Hayden to tell me to come in.
Yeah, which I don't do. So enjoy. Right, so we're back, and we are now going to talk about SATs. We've had a long chat about parenting. Thank you so much for that, Sophie. It was great to get your insights and know what our future holds. But we're going to talk about SATs now. It's very interesting to us, and it is SAT season. Even Dylan and I are making videos and things with our company on SATs at the moment, and we're doing a lot of SATs prep at school. And I just want to start with one thing, all right? Because this is possibly the best resource I've ever used. And Sophie, it does come from you. I'm just picking you up here.
Right.
The one-page answers that you made for SATs. I imagine you get a ton of downloads on those things because I see people asking for them on Facebook all the time, and they are so unbelievably handy. So if you are in year 6 and you're doing the SATs, rather than having the massive booklet to get the answers from and constantly going through the whole booklet,
the worst.
Sophie has put all of the answers onto one single page, which you can print or you can have on your screen, and it is the most useful thing when it comes to being sat there for several hours marking SAT. So thank you for making those. Just wanted to pick you up.
It's such a simple thing. So I don't know why they would put like one answer on one page sometimes. Ridiculous.
It is annoying.
There we go.
And worst case scenario, like with the reading paper, sometimes there's like more nuanced things to go and look out for. You can always go to the booklet for like one or two of those things. But having it all on one page, oh my days. Yeah, super handy. So thank you for that. Definitely sped up my marking last week.
That's what I like to hear.
By a good amount of time. Yeah. Anyway, so Sophie, you're the expert here, right? So we're gonna have a bit of a chat about SATs in general. But if there's anywhere you want to go, you take us down that path with SATs. And I think maybe we can start with some interesting insights. So last year, I think it was after the 2023 SATs, there was a lot of backlash, I guess. I know Dylan was quite vocal about it on Twitter and things, and you were as well. And I don't know if you've got anything to mind. I don't want to put you on the spot too much if you haven't got these things in front of you. But can you remember anything interesting about the 2023 SATs that you wrote about in terms of maybe how the papers were designed or some of the interesting things that you found out afterwards?
I mean, I can tell it kind of follows a similar trend to a lot of the other papers in terms of, I think one of the main things that I've noticed from all of them, and I do know this off the top of my head because I've said it so many times, is that on pretty much all the papers since 2016 is an anomaly in lots of cases. I don't know if you remember it. It was just weird and wonderful in so many ways. I think that was the first one since the new curriculum. So when I say, I'm going to say from 2017 onwards, because I feel like 2016, we were all trying it out. The general pattern is in maths, you can pass a SATs paper by technically not knowing any year 6 content. So if you were to remove all of the questions based on year 6 lesson objectives and answered all the year 3, 4, 5 ones correctly, you could still pass the SATs paper because the pass mark has historically always been just above half, so like 51 to 54%, which is a similar proportion to the year 3, 4 and 5 content domains. So in theory, you could just abandon the entire year 6 maths curriculum and make sure your children solidly knew the rest of Key Stage 2, which obviously goes to show how important the rest of Key Stage 2 is. And they could probably still attempt some of the year 6 questions just on the knowledge they have from years 3, 4 and 5. And obviously EYFS 1 and 2, because that builds on it. Someone had a bit of a moan on Facebook at me because I said how important Key Stage 2 was. And they said, also Key Stage 1. And I was like, well, that goes without saying. Okay. Obviously, a little bit bitter about that. So there's that. And the other thing with the maths paper is that regardless of the year group, you could also just pass the paper on solely knowing 4 operations, so add, subtract, multiply and divide, content domains, and fractions, decimals and percentages. So again, in theory, you could just not even cover statistics, shape, all of that, just drill your arithmetic stuff, and pass the SATs paper. So I know it sounds like, I'm just catering to SATs, but we all know that those content domains appear in all the other areas of maths. So if anything, they are the ones they need the most, just for life and for secondary school anyway.
Sure.
So that was a really key thing. The reading, I think I've been saying for a long time, I think poetry is going to appear, and it hasn't. It's only appeared once, I believe, in a SATs paper since the new curriculum's come out. And I can't remember off the top of my head what year that was, maybe 2 or 3 papers ago. So for the last couple of years, I've been thinking, it's got to come up, let's look at some poetry, and it hasn't. So I'm surely, just by law of statistics, it's got to come up this year. But the reading pass mark, interestingly, was increasing, and then last year dropped, and now one of you might know, I can't remember off the top of my head what it was, but I think it was one of the lowest it's been in a while. Do either of you know what it was?
I think it was it was either 24 or 26. I can't remember, because I remember it was one mark
raw
either
score,
side of
not
half.
percentage.
Yeah, raw score.
Raw score. So I think 2016 was the lowest because of how hard that paper was. But again, discounting that, I think this is the lowest it's been, which was interesting. Don't know whether what that was a reflection of, really. Could be anything, could be all political, couldn't it? And then the grammar paper, off the top of my head, similarly to the maths, the majority of the paper, or the amount that you need to pass, you can pass on solely knowing it's 2 content domains. I think it is punctuation and word classes. I think it's those 2. G1 and G5 now off the top of my head. So word classes is a huge one, because obviously there's so much to know about nouns, verbs, adjectives, all of this. But again, you could kind of dismiss the rest of it and just focus on that. There's so many questions about identify the pronoun, identify the determiner. I mean, it's boring as anything, but if we drilled that into the kids, they could pass it. And the way that the SPAG paper's set up, again, as you know, the spelling's 20 marks, the grammar's 50 marks. If you have a really strong speller, they don't actually need that much in the grammar to pass. And if they're a really poor speller, annoyingly, they need loads in the grammar. I've always thought it's quite annoying that there's no allowances for officially dyslexic children in this case, but that's,
I think it's mad. Like, even just recently, we did our mock SATs. And I just, again, I got a boy in my class. He's really intelligent, such a lovely, hardworking boy. But spelling just happens to be a bit of a weakness for him.
Yeah.
And he smashed one of the highest scores in terms of the GPS paper out of 50.
Yeah.
But then got the lowest score in spelling by quite a lot.
Yeah.
And so his total came out sort of quite a lot lower than everyone else, and he was gutted. Because he's one of those kids who's really, he really wants to achieve this stuff.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh man, that really does suck, because he actually there's so much knowledge required for that GPS paper, which he has smashed, and he should feel really good about himself. But he's now feeling like, oh, not that good.
Yeah.
Because he couldn't spell some random arbitrary words.
Oh, it's stupid. I have so many issues with things like that. And I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think that is the grammar and spelling paper is taken into account for progress value added scores. I don't think it's used to set targets for children. So I know that the maths and the reading are used to set GCSE targets. I don't think the grammar is. So I always think, Dylan's nodding, so I'm hoping that's correct.
I read that somewhere. It might be from you.
Yeah. So I always think, do you know what? It doesn't matter if they don't do as well in the grammar because of that. But then also, I feel like the grammar's potentially one of the easiest ones to score higher in, because a lot of it is multiple choice and it's stuff that you can just drill the kids in, whereas the reading is obviously notoriously complex. And on that note, sorry, I'm going off on a million tangents. I find it really frustrating when people post, and it's not their fault at all, there's pressure from SLT, when people post on social media, I've got these cuspy children, and we're all, we all do it, cuspy children, boundary children, whatever, those children that are getting your 97s, 98s, 99s, got these cuspy children reading, really need them to pass. What can I do to get them past the pass mark? And I think, apart from test technique at this stage, what are you supposed to do with reading in a matter of weeks? They can either read and infer, or they can't. There's not that much you can do. Maths may be slightly different because you can just drill the arithmetic, but reading and spelling, they can either spell well or they can't. There's really not that much you can do at this stage, but people are quite rightly just desperate at this point and, doing a million practice papers and whatever they think is going to get them over the line. And it just creates a really interesting culture, I think, of desperate teachers doing things that maybe aren't the best for the children, but we're all in a situation where we have to do certain things because of our SLT. So
nothing feels like more of a waste of time than a test technique lesson.
Like a lesson that is solely focused on people can pretend it's not, but a lesson that's solely focused on realistically how to answer 3-mark questions in a reading paper, stuff like that. It's like we've all been there. We've all done them, but you really think about it. I'm like, oh god, what are we doing? Like,
That's soul destroyer, isn't it?
Seriously, what education's for?
Yeah.
And then another
guys.
thing I find that's really hard, like with your example, with you know, like the cuspy children, is I guarantee you there's loads of schools where the children who actually need help, so maybe the children kind of lower down, they probably get pushed to the side because it's like, oh, you're not going to pass anyway.
Yeah.
We're going to focus on these children who might go through the boundary. And I don't like that. I don't like the whole prioritization aspect that comes from this. I think it's icky.
Yeah.
It's
icky is a good word to describe it. I want to
this come in as a non-year 6 teacher. So you've been chatting away there, both of you, about, well, you know, you can pass if you just do these, and you can, you know, prioritize this, and it's easier to get marks when it comes to that, and da-da-da-da. So as a non-year 6 teacher looking in, I find it all a bit crazy. And I really my gut instinct is that we need to test children at the end of the Key Stage 2 to see where they're at. Obviously, I'm completely for testing, but I am absolutely massively against the whole culture of year 6 in general. And I think it works teachers to the bone. I think the pressure from SLT is huge because it defines your school. And I think it leads into this culture of doing stuff for a number to go up on the test at the end of the year, rather than what's best for the kids. And I'm not trying to diminish what you two do whatsoever, or, you know, the whole country as a whole. But how do you balance that as a year 6 teacher who wants the best for the children? How do you actually manage to do a whole year with your class and be the teacher to help them, but realistically you're actually getting them for a test? So where is the line there? How do you balance it?
Yeah. Oh, it's so hard, isn't it? I have so many things to say about this. I really like to underplay it massively, which has aggravated some SLT previously because they like to go the other way. Luckily, the school I'm in at the minute is so massively supportive. I think it does help contextually. We're a very small village school. The head teacher knows all the children, all the families inside out. So she has known about a particular cohort we've got. She's known them from foundation stage. So she knows almost what SATs is going to look like 3 or 4 years before we're going to get there. Whereas my experience in bigger schools is that, not all bigger schools, but that sometimes children can perhaps be treated like data and less like the child that they are, because there's so many of them. So we traditionally haven't had the most amazing SAT scores, but we have quite a high proportion of SEN, and I'm proud of our school. We work amazingly with our children, and they make progress in so many other areas that aren't necessarily scores on a SATs paper. And that's something I made sure I asked when I looked round the school that I'm at now, is how much focus they put on SATs. Because I personally didn't want to be at a school that was doing Easter boosters, after school boosters, before school boosters, purely doing English and maths from January to May, sometimes from September to May, or not doing PE, not doing art, all of this. And my school had never historically done that, and still don't do that. So that was something that's important to me. But I know that some parents, now some of my friends that are parents and not teachers, look at that data on a school website and will judge the school by, oh, that looks like a lovely school, but their SAT results are only this. Like, please don't just look at that. That's a tiny part of the story. You don't know what their progress is. Like, they might have been brilliant in year 2, and even though their SAT scores look that great, they haven't actually made good progress. Whereas some schools that might not look as great, they might have made amazing progress. You just can't see that part of the story. So back to your original question, I try not to make it a huge focus, to the point where maybe I went too far one year and the kids came in and said, oh, is it SATs this week? And I thought, okay, maybe I should have put a little bit more onus on it than turning up not even knowing they're doing a test. I just figure, what help does it do to the children to put so much pressure on them? They turn up, and we all know that when we're that anxious and stressed, we never perform as well that we're going to if we're relaxed. And at the end of the day, it's not even for them, it's for it's not even for us, but it doesn't benefit the children anyway. So why would we put them through extra stress for something that doesn't even benefit them?
It's
which is
for
very
a league table that we don't even want to be in.
Exactly.
It's like,
I realise it's easy for me to say working for such a supportive head and such a supportive school, and there are other teachers probably wanting to do the same, but they've got maybe in massive academies where those that are much higher up are telling them they have to hit XYZ, which leads me on to something we might come on to later, but having performance management based on SATs results for year 6 teachers, which is just so that is where I kind of stand with it. Dylan, I don't know how I'd be interested to hear. Sorry, I'm like interviewing you as well, but I'm genuinely interested, Hayden, how you like approach it.
Yeah, sure. What in terms of how we approach SATs at our school?
Yeah, like what Dylan was saying, kind of. Or how much do the children wear that are doing it? Are they stressed, or is your school generally?
I think our kids are super aware. Yeah. I think we're super aware. Our kids know. I mean, I've find myself using phrases like, I hate this, by the way. I find myself using phrases like, let's play the game. Let's just play the game. Because I almost can't make myself even pretend to that it's actually important. Yeah. So I'll just say things like, oh, play the game, because that's my way of saying this is pointless, but we've got to do it for some reason. Yeah. It's better than me saying that, especially with writing moderation, which is obviously kind of part of the whole your SATs in general. We've talked about writing moderation in previous episode, but just, I say to my kids, it's like, they're like, oh, I just want to be creative. So I want to do this and this. I'm like, oh yeah, you do need a semicolon in that though. Yeah. Play the game.
Have you found yourself saying, I'm not going to teach that because it's only 1 mark on the paper, or something that?
Yeah. And I don't like it. It's horrible. Yeah. This year I've been really strict actually, and I've been like, nope, we're teaching every single part of the curriculum for the sort of roughly allocated time that it's supposed to have. I'm not going to do 1 day on ratio because there might only be one. So no, I'm doing a week on ratio because I want them to understand that. I'm going to do 2 weeks on algebra or whatever it is. I don't care if it's 1 question. But it is hard because at the end of the day, like you said, if our performance management is based on, our school's pretty chill, by the way. Like we've actually got a really nice environment, so I don't feel that pressure as much. Yeah, I know it can be a lot worse. So we put that pressure on ourselves a lot of the time because our school is filled with people that really, 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 really care, and they want our school to look good because it's a great school. Yeah. But yeah, I've worked in other schools where you'd feel way more pressured, like that performance management lure of, your pay won't go up. It's like, what do you mean? What do you mean my pay is linked to this?
It's insane, isn't it? I just don't think. I mean, I've never been in that situation, but I have friends who are, this percentage must be achieved in order for you to go up a pay point. You just think, but you're the cherry on the cake. You've had them for. I worked out the fraction once for the number of teaching weeks, but bearing in mind they've been in school for 6 full years by the time they get to year 6, and you've only got however many weeks before May to top off their education, and yet your pay is going to be based on how they do in SATs. It's the most ridiculous thing.
It's rubbish.
And then that creates the whole hierarchy of, I don't know if you've had a teacher, either of you say to you, if you've moved year groups, if you go up a year, they go, oh, congratulations, they think it's a promotion. And if you go down a year, they think you're kind of a demotion.
In the bad books, yeah, definitely.
And it's just we need our best teachers in year 6. And I actually think we need our best teachers in EYFS where it all kicks off. Because that's where the foundation of the learning comes from.
I agree.
But yeah, I can't even remember what the original point was.
No, it's just about pay, progression and pay and stuff like that. I know I'm going to bring Dylan in a second because I know he's had opinions in the past on pay performance and how data comparisons, that like the worst thing I think I can think of in terms of comparing data to like say this is how much progress they should be making is comparing it to a previous cohort. Dylan, I'm going to bring you in on that one. When we look at data and say, well, last year, we got 68% expected, so this year we need 75. Go on, Dylan.
Yeah. Honestly.
Are you warmed up?
You get me started again. Yeah. Honestly, it winds me up because the worst thing is sometimes it's done really not maliciously at all. And I've worked with people who've brought this up, right? And they're simply just saying it as like a point to make. They're just like, well, last year we did get this many kids here, so a dip's going to be bad. And they're not being malicious or anything, but I'm just like, okay, those kids could read though, and my kids can't, so that is quite different. And then the other way is I've also worked with people where I've seen it happen before, where they they're being dead serious, like SLT, and I've worked with someone who said in a different school that I work in currently, but they've said that they've literally been told no excuses, it's got to be done, and it's like, oh, but I don't know if you were around for the last 2 years, but there was a global pandemic where kids didn't come into school. So when I say excuse, I actually mean reason, and therefore we can't really remotely compare this. It's mad.
Yeah. I sometimes find with like governors meetings, when obviously there are people that are quite rightly supposed to hold you account to things, and if all you've got to go on is data and you're not au fait with the like inner workings of a school, you see these numbers and you think, oh, logically the numbers should stay the same or go up, and then you get judged on that rather than, like you say, the complexities of the different cohorts and the timetable and the different staff members and the gaps that we've had. And you cannot say, oh, well, they had a 15% drop in maths, so what are you doing with your maths teaching? Why is your maths teaching so bad? And it's so much more complex than that. It's just such a random way of assessing and judging everyone on.
As maths leads, we had this exact thing, what you just said, exact thing, where in our school it always seemed to be year 5 where the kind of the focus from SLT completely, no malice whatsoever, but the focus from SLT would be like, the data is dropping off in year 5. I mean, what's going on here? This is a bit odd. Like, why does this keep happening? And if you really dig deep into it, you can almost break the Key Stage 2 curriculum up, in our opinion, to year 3 and 4 and year 5, 6. Because if you take, for example, fractions, decimal percentages, a huge chunk of what the children will end up doing in year 6, the jump in difficulty going from year 4 to year 5 is insane. Like year 4, we work with all the same kilometers, or all the same denominators.
Yes.
And the only difference where we use different denominators is if the children have a fraction more in year 4, so they can just see what equivalent fractions are. If you jump forward to year 5, suddenly they've got to order different denominators, add different denominators, use equivalent fractions without a fraction more, and their multiplication, they do long multiplication in year 5. There's so many strands where instead of just adding a digit and a place value, but like the procedure's the same, it's a huge new learning curve. And we found that data dropped to year 5, and actually we've really implemented this idea now of that's going to happen, that's expected, and it's not judged as much now by people in charge.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Right, Dylan, there's new rules in this podcast because you're lagging, because your internet's not so great. Well done for preparing for the podcast. You're no longer allowed to speak. So you are now only allowed to speak if Sophie or I invite you to the conversation, at which time we'll wait for you to hear it because you're 5 seconds behind us.
What's the rules, Hayden? Sorry,
and
what?
Then no, you're doing it again. You're doing it again, mate. You're interrupting. Don't speak. No more speaking. This is my podcast now, and you're a guest. Mine is Sophie's podcast. Anyway, so just moving on. Carrying on with the stats chat because I'm super invested. Going back to a final point about the pay for the performance appraisal system, right? I'm speaking now directly to listeners, particularly if you're not even in education. What do you think is that one of the biggest problems? What do you think happens a lot across the country when teachers' pay and their performance pay is related to how well their kids do in the SATs? I'm sure people at home probably thinking, "Oh, I reckon people fudge their scores." And Sophie, I know we were chatting the other night about this very briefly because we were like, we've got to talk about this on the podcast.
Yeah.
What is your experience? And maybe you've not had any personal experience, but what is your understanding of how performance-related pay might impact the way some schools and children are performing suddenly in the SATs exams?
What's been really interesting is around SATs week on Facebook, because you can post anonymously, is how many people say, oh my goodness, I saw my colleague or my head doing this, is this right? Or even sometimes admitting they've done certain things. And do you know what, half the time I can't even blame them, because to have potentially, like you say, your pay based on the SATs, and the SATs are, again, I worked it out once, can't remember off the top of my head, something like 5 hours of tests to represent an entire 7 years worth of learning over not even whatever percentage of the curriculum, because loads of areas aren't even tested, and you don't know how the kids are feeling that day, and it's like my pay is dependent on how a child's going to perform on a test that day, and we all know children are the most variable creatures, and so you get things like, okay, a question testing passive voice to active voice. Can the child convert from passive to active? Have they got the mark? Fine. But have they put a full stop? No, they've got to put a full stop, so we're not going to give you the mark for that. So even though you've understood the content, you're not getting the mark because you've not done this random thing that's nothing to do with passive and active voice. Just stupid things like that. I think potentially one of the worst culprits for it was last year's reading test, where there were so many unacceptable answers. Again, maybe Dylan can nod or shake his head, because obviously I wasn't in school for this, but I remember, because I was on maternity leave, I think there was a question, and it was something like the answer would accept rustlers but not the rustlers, or something ridiculous where it would accept a word and not another word. Or Hayden, do you remember?
Yeah, I literally marked this recently, and I think that might have been it. It was like, it was okay. I remember it. It was the stupidest question I've ever seen in my life. I hated this question.
Yeah.
After reading the text, there was a bit where it said, and then it hit her, and the question says, in quotations, then it hit her. What is it?
Yes.
That's the question, and I hated that question.
Yeah.
And the answer is the realization that it was the rustlers, and it also accepted rustlers. Yeah. But not the rustlers. So the people that the group, because they were like, oh no, because that's not. It is rustlers. You could replace it with that word, but not the rustlers. It isn't actually them. Yeah.
It's so insane. I just think, if you're not, in fact, not even if you're not a teacher, if you're not a year 6 teacher, lots of year 6 teachers have no idea that kids are, this is what they're testing the kids on. This is an understanding of their reading test of their reading comprehension. This is a test of guess what is in my head with this random person that's writing the mark scheme. It's just so weird. And a few years ago, because I think they've changed the rule now, I remember in the grammar test, if you had to write a word with an apostrophe, if you in your handwriting connected the letters across the apostrophe, so if it was it's for it is, and you connected the T and the S and then put apostrophe, they wouldn't give you it. So you had to separate the T and the S. I think they've changed that rule now, but you just think that is insane. Yeah. Well, don't take my word for it. I have to double check that.
Because I teach that. Isn't that mad?
So do I. And I think it's so stupid.
Yeah, like as if that's a valuable use of my time. Like telling kids that you need to leave a space between where the apostrophe goes. It's like, I get it, it's cool, but it's not that important. It's not really that important, to be honest. I'd rather they just can put the apostrophe where it goes. I don't think there's a human being alive that won't be able to interpret that apostrophe goes between those 2 letters just because they're joined underneath it. Like, come on. What are we talking about?
Ridiculous. I think the maths test is potentially the only one where I've never thought, wow, this is really unfair. I think there's been a couple of questions. Do you remember the one about reflecting a triangle? Was that last year's one? And the way the axis was drawn was really weird, and so some children who clearly understood how to reflect a triangle were putting it in the wrong place and getting the marks wrong. It just feels like, I understand that, I get the marking system and how on, that's a whole nother issue, because so many SATs markers complain about pay and workload and treatment, but I understand how it has to be marked. But you think, if, as you know, SATs markers are all professional teachers, if you can see the child is clearly understood, we should be allowed to give them the mark. The fact that they've got these stupid rules in place, why? They're 10 or 11 years old.
I know. I constitely get annoyed about that. But anyway, going back to the original point, I guess, is that cheating is rife. So if you're not in this world, cheating is rife in the SATs, because the pressure's on. And like Sophie said, you can understand there are lots of different situations where you might be like, I might be a bit more sympathetic, because if a child's whole knowledge of apostrophe is tested on one question that comes up and they just happen to make a donut error, and you know as their teacher that they're super good at apostrophes, and you're standing there watching them make that mistake, you can understand the temptation for some people to be like, oh, check that one, which is what happens a lot. It'll tap on the table. This stuff happens all the time. And then there's that kind of more systemic cheating of head teachers coming around and saying, right, do this, do that. That adult's going to go stand over there. You keep an eye on them 2 kids. You know, make sure they're getting the right answers. Every time they get something wrong, you tap on their head. All that kind of cheating is that's when it's from, like, when it's coming from the top down, it's like they just want good data.
Or opening of papers early so that they can see the content and sharing revision. That kind of classic sort of stuff. All before the second read the maths paper. Let's open it up. Oh, what's coming up on this one? All that kind of rubbish. I actually want to go to Dylan. I'm going to bring Dylan in. I'm not going to be too mean because he has been silent for ages. Obviously, Dylan, you haven't taught in year 6, so you've had your whole career outside of year 6, and that pressure maybe hasn't impacted your mind too much. But do you find that in other year groups that there is still an element of or at least the culture, I guess, because obviously you've got to reflect on other schools here. There's still a culture of cheating in this test, or do you find it is more straightforward, like, no, we just want to find out what the kids can do? Is it more relaxed and actually meaningful to test in different year groups?
Yeah, I'd say the pressures are much less than what I hear about going on in year 6. However, I would like to have two camps here. One is just straight up cheating, and that still happens. And I know I've known of that happening with different teachers, straight up just literally saying to the children, rubbing it out for them, and they've got to do it again. Like that happens whether you're in year 3, year 4, year 5, depending on the teacher, because I think pride comes into it sometimes as well. And same thing like you're saying, okay, well, my kids can't get 2 out of 50, I've got to at least give them 6, because then it looks like I've done nothing all year. And I think with experience sometimes you kind of learn to be like, no, that is what that child can do, and that's okay. That is what it is. I would say that there's a lot more, instead of cheating, there's a lot more inconsistency when it comes to other year groups. I think with the SATs, you have to follow the instructions that they give you in the guidance. You read it out word for word. There's a very clear way that you should be delivering that. And if you don't, then I'd say that's kind of cheating. Whereas with other year groups, there might be some staff who will spend 20 minutes before a maths paper in year 4 going over the basics. Maybe before a GPS, they'll say, right, class, what's an adjective, by the way? It's this, this, and this. Okay, well, what's a noun? It's this, this, and this. And kind of like lead your class down to revising, cramming in beforehand. Whereas I take the approach, although I get why they do that in year 6, because you don't technically know what's coming up and they want them to do their best. I think that's fine. As a year 4 teacher, I like to just give them the test, especially when it's early on in the year or halfway through the year, because I don't want them to have only circled the adjective, because I literally 5 seconds before say, I know what an adjective is now because Mr. Price just told me. I circle it, I get the answer right. It doesn't inform my planning, doesn't inform my kind of going on from there. I don't know. So I would say there's definitely two camps. Cheating still happens, but I think we have a problem in general with consistency. And I don't know, what do you guys think about testing, not as a way to judge people and say, okay, we know the SATs is to see how the kids are getting on for Key Stage 2, but how useful do you think testing is when it comes to actually, I don't know, helping and informing your teaching? Do you think there's a bit of a disparity there, or what do you think?
Well,
is it mainly just...
I'm sure Sophie will come in as well.
Yeah.
So I think testing is so useful when I can make a gap analysis at the end of it. That's basically it. As long as I can make a gap analysis and it informs my teaching, then it's useful. If it's solely for another reason, it might as well not happen. Because what I don't need to do really is test my kids 5 or 6 times a year. Like, I don't need to do that. Honestly, once or twice is more than enough to make sure that I'm planning along the right lines. Because what I can do is use the 6 hours a day that I'm with the kids to formatively pick up kind of where they are at. Like, I think that is generally enough. If tests were gone, I'm pretty confident, to be honest with you, that I could still do my job pretty accurately, not having had any test data across the year. But I do think a gap analysis can lead to insights that maybe you might have missed in the classroom. I don't know what you think about that, Sophie.
No, exactly what you said. I agree. Which kind of leads me on to something potentially controversial. I don't know how you feel about when Key Stage 1 tests were in place, and obviously they're internally marked, and how that can sometimes lead to potentially sometimes inflated data that we then have to build on. And I know, like, our school personally, we're not using them now anymore. But I know that's been tricky in the past, especially with friends in other schools that have sometimes, again, performance management or some sort of target based on Key Stage 1 data, which has been marked by the teachers. And I'm sure, we like to think we're really fair, but if we were to mark our own SATs papers, I'm sure they'd come out higher than if they're marked they're marked by other people. But have you found that also a problem in the past?
Of course it is, yeah. And I think you get the same from Key Stage 3 teachers. I've spoken to Key Stage 3 teachers, and they unanimously say, "Oh, bloody Key Stage 2 data is always wrong. It's always inflated." Yeah, and because it is. Because we do cram a bunch of pointless knowledge into these kids that they don't care about. We cram it in. They do the SATs, and then no one talks about it again. Half of that stuff. Yeah. And that kind of leads me on to another point, really, because what's your opinion on post-SATs, no more maths and English? Bye-bye. That's gone out the window.
Yeah.
Because that happens a lot in schools.
I know. It's tricky, isn't it? I tend to find, again, from just seeing online, the schools that do solely maths and English before SATs, and then the ones that don't do it at all after SATs, and they use that to fit in all the art, PE and the DT that they didn't do, which, great, the kids need that at some point, but that is partly the reason, I think, why kids end up going to secondary school who have maybe passed a maths sats paper but then can't do their timetables when they get there. Because not only have they got the 6 weeks of summer, which they're inevitably going to lose stuff over that time, but they're going to a new environment, which means they inevitably forget things because they're just overwhelmed by the new environment. But they've also not covered it since the SATs paper. I just think it shows, I think it shows the wrong message to the children that you're just doing maths for a test. I say maths, I know obviously English as well, but maths seems to be the key one that people drop off. You're just teaching it for the test rather than actually this is an important life skill, this is important for secondary school. So I'm pro carrying on with your maths. I mean, I'm going to have to. I won't have covered half the stuff that I need to cover in the year 6 curriculum by SAT, so I'm going to have to cover just to cover the curriculum. But I really personally don't like it when people are just like, oh, I'm just going to print a roller coaster challenge off Twinkle and they can do that for 6 weeks. And like, yes, that's good. It's good to practice their math skills, but let's maybe, continue plugging the adding and subtracting vibe as well, because that's going to be out the window.
I agree. I'm just going to make a shout out, by the way, to your little Rory in the background. He sounds like he's having a great time.
I'm so sorry.
I can see you panicking. Don't worry about it.
My mum's bathing him. It sounds like he's having a great time, but it's been a little noisy. So.
No, it's all good. We know hearing the sounds of a happy child in the background. What more would you want from a teacher podcast? Eh?
Exactly.
Anyway, Dylan, I'm going to bring you back in. Mr. lagging behind. It's weird him not having control, isn't it?
No, I didn't notice.
Very strange. Very, very strange. Dylan, did you want to add anything at all to cheating in the SATs before we move on to a different point?
Yeah, I think, again, from my point of view, you both probably know what I'm like by now. Stuff does rile me up. It does get me annoyed. And I've been listening to you talking about it. And I think it's so easy for me because I've got the perspective of not being in year 6. And I want you to maybe knock me down a peg, both of you. Okay? Because I think, having not taught year 6 before, I do not understand how people get drawn into thinking cheating is ever okay. Because I look at it and I just think, okay, well, if I was in year 6, I would just say no. And then if someone cheated, I would just say, don't cheat, that's cheating. And knock me down, please, reply to me here and tell me how I'm completely wrong. But I never ever, I can't think of a situation where I wouldn't challenge it. And maybe when I was an ECT, I wouldn't have, and I'd have just gone down the road of, oh yeah, I've got to do it, please. But as experienced teachers, I don't really ever understand or really truly accept when people just say, it's just the game. And I know, Hayden, you said that yourself. And I've multiple times said to you, well, it's not though, is it? Because it is the child's education and you are just cheating. I'm not getting past that point. So please come back to me and tell me that I'm wrong, because that's where I still sit.
I think personally, I mean, you'll never know if I'm lying, but I can tell you now, I've never cheated, because I've worked in schools that have been realistic with SATs results. So, but I can empathise with people that have, because I put very little faith in the system anyway. I don't believe that it generates a true reflection of the children's ability. I don't believe it generates a true reflection of the school or the teaching ability. If it did, I would be a lot more anti people cheating because you are falsifying data. I think the data's falsified anyway in so many other ways that actually, if a teacher feels so much pressure from above because their pay is dependent on it, or because, I don't know, pressure that their school will look bad if they get a certain, whatever pressure they're under, because you only ever do it because you're under pressure, and you're pointing at a question again, or you're reading a word that you're not supposed to read, or you're saying check this. I can empathise with that. I'm not saying, it's a grey area. I think there are things that are clearly wrong, like opening the paper. Okay, all cheating is wrong, sorry. But are clearly more wrong if we can categorise it. Things like opening the papers up early and telling kids what are on it. That's clearly unfair. But I'm just saying, I do empathise with people that perhaps they feel pushed to do those kind of
just
things.
Just like an emotional reaction maybe in the moment, rather than a predetermined, I'm going to open these papers and cheat. That's a bit different. And usually that does come from top down, I think, that pressure. Yeah. I fully agree. That emotional empathy I can have for people.
Yeah. It's tricky because I know, our schools, who are assumedly very fair, doing things right, are going to be compared against schools that are probably could be cheating and schools that really are cheating, and they're going to look like they're really amazing schools and we're not if their data's better. But, that's just... Oh, I'm going to use Dylan. It's nature of the game, isn't it? Sorry, that's just
it's nature of the game.
It's just how these things work, and if I wish just people knew how not like inaccurate the actual data is and how much
Yeah.
pressure some people are under. It just makes the whole system not a level playing field at
Well,
all.
like I was saying earlier, even with the fact that Key Stage, the fact that most secondary schools just go, oh, there's a load of rubbish, this data, we just retest them at the start of year 7.
Exactly.
It just it brings me down a peg, and like I guess this is the answer you're looking for, maybe Dylan. It makes me not care as much.
Yeah.
That, oh no, some teachers felt really pressured to get their kids in the moment to show the knowledge that they have when they've noticed they weren't doing it. That kind of low level cheating. It makes me go like, oh, don't do it. But I'm not going to lose sleep over it. I'm not that mad about it. I understand why someone might have did that in the moment. And you know what?
Yeah.
Key stage 3 teachers don't give a crap anyway. So
No.
it's,
Yeah.
It's a hard one. But when you hear about head teachers systemically doing it, that riles me right up. So I'm like, no, you're doing it for nothing but selfish gain now. Like, I don't care what you want.
Yeah.
Just seeing if Dylan wanted to come in. Don't worry. It's
He was
all right.
looking very pensive.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Listen, I want to, but I'm really scared to talk. So I'm just going to come in very quickly now. Again,
Yeah,
I'm going to come back
cool.
because I think I don't think that I don't think I'm being fair. So I'm going to be selfish, have a look at myself here, because my gut instinct is what I said earlier. But I absolutely don't think it's fair when it comes down to people's pay and it comes down from the top down. And I know that I'm oversimplifying it massively. I think the overarching point, I suppose, is that I see the role of a teacher in that respect is to try and fight against it a little bit at least, because it's the first ball. That's the first way we can get the ball rolling, rather, to kind of go against all of the pressure we make up ourselves. Because to me, SATs, the pressure around SATs is invented by us as teachers. It's invented by us. Yes, the system is broken, and we're not in the government. We can't abolish SATs and change it. And I don't think we should abolish SATs. Like I said earlier, I think it's good to test children, but the ongoing pressure and worries is kind of self-inflicted in part by teachers having this importance on it and pushing themselves to say, okay, we did reach 90% across the board combined last year. We didn't, but we did because I cheated a little bit and I pushed the boat a little bit. But guess what? Next year, if I don't hit that again, I'm ruined even more. So I think we have to kind of break the wheel. We have to destroy it now. Almost reset everything, just let the kids do the test and just go from there and be more accepting that, you know what, cohorts are different. We've had 2 cohorts in our school, one year after the other, where we got a combined score in the 90s and we got a combined score in the 70s. That looks terrible. But do you know what it does say? They've had the exact same education with the exact same teachers, and that cohort was 20% different, and that should be okay.
Can I disagree with you really slightly on something you just said, controversially? I kind of see an equivalence in the teacher strikes thing, that really collectively we should all be striking to make a point, and that would be the best thing for everyone. But on an individual level, because you're losing pay, I wouldn't expect anyone to individually, whatever the opposite of benefit is, to have a detriment to themselves for the greater good. And I kind of see like that for the SATs. I totally agree with you that we should collectively fight against the system, but we're not collectively doing that. And so it's hard to say to one teacher whose pay is perhaps dependent on that, you really need to make a sacrifice for the greater good of the system, because that's not all on them. So I do agree with you, but I think I overall still don't agree, just because of the basis of positions that certain teachers are in. Yeah, which does mean we'll never get there. I also realise that. We're never going to get if we don't all collectively do something. But it's like, I would love all the parents in one school 1 year to just boycott SATs to see what would happen. If all parents said, I don't want my children to sit SATs this year, what would actually happen? And how amazing would that be just to see? But that obviously wouldn't, because not all parents are going to get together to do that. So,
yeah, no, it's a really interesting point. Dylan, do you want to come back in with that?
Yeah, no, I think I completely understand it, because we basically I'm coming at it from an idealistic point of view, and I'm someone sometimes who very much argues against being idealistic in certain reasons and certain realms. So it's kind of contradictory for me to suddenly become idealistic here. But I think the big reason why I still am is because I'm not in year 6. So it's very easy for me to be idealistic until I've lived it. I also think that what you said about the strikes is bang on. And Hayden and I have locked heads on this non-stop, because similarly to me saying we need to break the wheel and not do all this in year 6, I've been the person to say, guys, we need to go on strike because it's the only way of changing anything. But when someone does turn around to me and say, well, I am a single mum, and if I go on strike, then actually my kids can't do swimming club this month because I won't be able to afford it. Then I'm like, oh my God, don't strike. Of course you shouldn't strike. But that's contradicting myself again, because you're absolutely right. It's the personal against the group. And it's like when someone says they're not going to vote in the general election because in their constituency, you know, it's thousands of votes different. They just a safe seat for, like, let's say it's a safe seat for the Conservatives. Well, I'm not going to vote because it won't make a difference. Well, do you know what? It actually won't make a difference. But me as an idealist, I'd say, no, you should vote. Of course you should. But, you know, actually it's okay sometimes to say, but it won't make a difference though. So guess what? It doesn't actually matter. So I completely get where you're coming from.
Yeah, it's a very, very hard argument to go against, really. Because what do you say when someone says it won't make a difference, but do it?
Yeah,
very, very, very tricky. Anyway, I've got one last question, Sophie, because we've been chatting for a long time. We might even split this episode into two. I don't know if you're listening to this and we've already split it into two, then you know why, because we spoke for ages. But one last thing about boosters, because right at the start of the conversation, you did kind of imply that you're not really an advocate of like Easter boosters and general boosters, I guess, like when people take away afternoon curriculum time to do more maths and English to get ready for the SATs is what I'm implying by boosters. First of all, could you just clarify your opinion and just on boosters in general, whether you like them, whether you don't like them, and also I just want to separate that a little bit from revision though.
Okay.
I don't think revision necessarily is a bad thing.
Yeah.
But perhaps in my opinion on boosters is that I don't like it taking the curriculum. What's your view on getting ready for SATs?
So I personally am against anything outside, a lot outside of what you would usually do for maths and English to prep for SATs, particularly if it's outside of school time. I am personally against that. I just think it sends the wrong message to children that it only happens. I mean, I had this discussion on Facebook and some people were saying, we do it in every year group. I'm like, well, fine, if you do it in every year group and it's standard routine. But if you're just doing it in SATs, just doing it in year 6, surely that sends the message that you only need this for SATs. We don't need it in any other year group. And we need to suddenly cram all this extra stuff in because we haven't prepped you enough before. I know I'm going to ruffle feathers by saying that, but that is the message that seems to get across. Then you have people saying, well, my kids enjoy it though. Well, I'm sure they do enjoy it because, you know, it's novel to be in school when you're not supposed to be in school. I'm sure the parents like it because it's free childcare. But a lot of the time the teachers aren't paid. They're pressured into doing it. I personally, although this sort of contradicts what I was saying before, I personally wouldn't do it even if I was offered money. Although, again, like I said before, I totally understand why people would do it if they were being paid because we could all use the money. I just personally wouldn't. And yeah, I think you should be able, whatever kids can achieve in their maths and English time in their normal school hours is a true reflection of what they can do in SATs. And you could almost argue it's another form, maybe not of cheating, but of twisting the data a lot, because if you have done maths and English over and over again in school and outside of school, and some schools have just done it in their allotted time, they're obviously going to do better on the SATs page because it's been drilled into them. So that is my non-sitting on the fence opinion of boosters.
No, that's fair enough. It sort of aligns up with kind of what we've said in the past as well. And I think you've made a really interesting point there that got me thinking about comparisons and how it is in a fair comparative test, right, in science. You have certain variables that have to be the same, right? And when we take the approach of comparing children across the country of SATs, we all just kind of ignore that schools can teach as much or little English and maths as we want. Yeah. It is a bit weird, isn't it? You'd think in a proper test that would all be standardised. No. In primary school, you have 5 hours of maths a week and you have 5 hours English. Everyone has the same thing, so it's a bit more of a fair test. We can compare the ability of children because, like you said, if we've got one school that are doing tons and tons and tons of extra stuff after school and before school and through every single half term to catch these kids up, and then they say, wow, look how much smarter our kids are. It's like, well, you have objectively done a ton more lessons with them than other schools. So, like, is that a fair comparison? I just, an interesting thought.
Should it be regulated a bit more? I mean, that would be so difficult to do. Yeah, can you imagine if they said you're only allowed to teach, I don't know, what would the maths be? 200 hours of maths in year 6 or something. Can you imagine?
Yeah, it'd be mad. And I don't necessarily think that's a good idea, but it does I guess just highlights another flaw in the whole comparative league table rubbish that we do with the schools. So my last little question then that's sort of linked to that is just what's your opinion on revision? Because I know that I know that you're quite an advocate of learning by questions, which is a tool. If you're not aware of it, it's a really good tool. Please go and Google it. Like, we think it's great as well. And I know you recently put a post up on Facebook, an article I presume that you wrote or came through learning by questions of top 10 common misconceptions people are making in maths. And I presume people are supposed to be using that to kind of tackle things that kids typically get wrong to help them sort of in their SATs and revision. So do you have a slightly different opinion on revision? And if you do, how can we tackle revision at school that isn't in the form of Easter boosters and things like that legitimately?
I do, because I see revision as what every year group does, really, but maybe a bit more in year 6, because every year group's going to revisit content, hopefully, so that their children understand it. And revision is essentially revisiting content, but we perhaps do it for a few more lessons than other year groups do, because we know there's going to be a fairly high stakes test on it. So rather than, I tend to try and save my revision until after Easter, or if possible, a week or two before SATs, and just teach new content or cover the curriculum until then, and then use the last couple of weeks to just recover the content that they've already done, because some of it they haven't spent long on since maybe October or November, so they just need to revisit again. So to me, that's very different to boosters, because you are doing it during their normal maths or English time, and you can make it, like you say, we do have to do an element of test technique which you can fit in with revision. So the things I love doing are the correct my test paper things. You fill out a test paper with all the common misconceptions that your class have, and your class have to be the teacher. I mean, that's a great way of teaching test technique and revising content that's the kids don't think that they're learning, because they just love the fact that they're pretending to be a teacher. So I think there's loads of different ways of making that fun. LBQ I do love for it, because I mean, LBQ I use in my year 5s, and the year 3 and 4 teacher use it as well. So not just for SATs prep, but just for revisiting content. So last week I taught a lesson on adding fractions, so I'm going to do an LBQ this week as my warm up on adding fractions to see what they can remember. But yeah, I just see it as something that every teacher does, but we just have to do it a little bit more intensely because of SATs week coming up.
Yeah, it's interesting you say we have to, because I think the counter argument might end up being that we don't have to.
Yeah,
it's
true.
Just that we're all sucked into that SATs world a little bit, whether we like to say it or not. Because realistically, we should just be teaching the curriculum. But I do it as well. I absolutely will be doing exactly that. I'll be going over loads of key content again, probably more than I ever normally would in like a standard maths lesson. But in those last few weeks up to SATs, I definitely will be cramming in just a bit more revision to make sure it's kind of there at the forefront, because I want them to show themselves off in their best light for this test that's really important for me, but not really for me or them.
Yeah, I know. Have we got time if I just say one more thing about it?
Yeah, go for it.
You've probably heard of this idea once. I've always thought it'd be a good idea. Although, I don't know, what do you think about having the SATs at the beginning of year 7 and the secondary school host it?
I've never thought about it. What would you say the pros and cons are to that?
So in my mind, I feel like it makes the playing field more level, perhaps. I haven't put loads of thought into it, but on top of my head, all children have had the 6-week summer. And so I feel like it's more a true reflection of their primary school learning. And it also takes away the whole, none of the secondary school teachers are going to be pressured to cheat, because they've not taught the content and their pay is not going to be reflected on it. There's going to be no pressure for boosters and cramming and all of this. We've actually got the whole year to teach the whole curriculum, just like every other year group. The only downside could potentially be, the second that I can see, is the secondary school teachers will want low scores, I think, so that their progress will look good by the end of year 11. But then if they take them at the beginning of year 7, how can you manufacture low scores, because you've had nothing to do with the kids at that point? So I just heard that idea once, and I can't see many cons to it, really.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think we should explore that a bit more. I kind of want to go away and think about that one. And
I should have
do like
mentioned that earlier.
No, it's really cool, because we could do like some Instagram reels and things on it.
And
talk about it, maybe put a poll out or something like that. But yeah, that's a really good point. I'd love to think more about what the potential cons are, or if there is a big flaw. Because like you said, it's harder to manufacture scores, and if it's in the best interest of the year 7 teachers for the kids to just not even truly reflect themselves, but if their best interest would be for them to do as worse as possible, so that their progress data looks good. Cool, Dylan, you come in, I can see you ready to poised and ready.
Look, I'm thinking straight away, because my initial thoughts are, every single year 7 child goes to secondary school and does a baseline test anyway. So why not standardize it and just make it an official key stage 2 test? Because what's happening currently is we do the key stage 2 test. I think it serves much more as just a a marker for how a school is performing, rather than useful for the child moving forward. So it would get rid of any kind of official government marker on how a school is performing, which might be a problem. Like, do they have to put more on an Ofsted visit, which is the last thing we want right now? But equally, I think it is much better for a secondary school to see exactly where their children are when they get to them, as a really formal standardized test across the country. So I think it's hugely beneficial for secondary school. I think it's going to leave a huge gaping gap in how the government feels like, or it seems to them, to the public, how we're going to judge how a school is actually doing. Because like SATs or not, it does really hold us accountable, I think, in a good school, throughout the whole of the journey through the school. It keeps everyone accountable, because I'm thinking of SATs when I teach year 4. I'm thinking, okay, they need to know these year 4 curriculum basics right now, because actually it's going to build when it goes to year 5, and it's going to build when it goes to year 6. So it's a really good idea, I think, for data for children in secondary school. It's good for primary school teachers because it would take away all this stress. But I think we would be missing what I actually think, I've said a few times now in this podcast, it's actually a good thing to see where children are at the end of Key Stage 2, personally, I think.
Jumping in on that point, then I think there's one flaw I've sort of thought of. I don't know, you can explore it with me, which is that thinking about that fair test analogy again, about it being comparative and looking at comparing children on an individual level, which might then impact how the school is judged as well. Over the 6-week summer holiday, I think it would be reasonable to suggest that maybe a bunch of the children, a percentage of the children that really like learning, would go away and make sure they do a bit of extra revision over the summer, potentially.
Or do you know what, parents get tutors?
Tutors, but keeping that trajectory up for them, because they like learning and they're in that cycle. And then equally the opposite happening with children that are disengaged with learning. Not only, they're going to have 6 weeks off, they're not going to think about it at all. If anything, they're going to go down more than the average child. And it might just end up kind of expanding the gap between your top 5%, your bottom 5%. But I don't know. I don't know how I'm making this up.
Yeah, but my retort to that, and Sophie, maybe you could come back to what I'm about to say. My retort to that would be, so what? That's more useful, because at the minute, that's happening anyway. We get the data from before that happens. They go to secondary school and it's all skewed because of what you just said, and it's actually not reliable. So what if kids like learning? Do you know what? It's the same as if a kid's good at football and they get really good at football over the summer holidays and one kid doesn't. When they go to school, they're still better at football. So it's good to know that. We're not going to pretend that they're not now better at football. Same for English and maths. They're better at English and maths because they've done the work. Well, I need to know that at the start of year 7.
That's true. And actually, those that haven't done any learning for 6 weeks, whereas it might have been crammed into them and they poured out on a test and they look like they're a lot better at it, if they've not done anything for 6 weeks, it might be really helpful for the schools to know that's where I really need to put my focus there, which may have been hidden beforehand, potentially. So
actually, really, really good outcome for the secondary schools and knowing where they are, but just potentially worse for if the school before is then judged on that. It might just look a bit worse on them because all that cramming and cheating they did is not going to pay off as much. So I guess that's the flaw. But like Dylan said, who cares then?
Yeah.
If that's the drawback, which is just like vanity stats. But the secondary school that's now going to be dealing with these children for the next 5-6 years actually have a bit of a better reflection of what they can do.
Yeah.
Then probably objectively a net win for the kids, I think. I don't know. I like that idea. Really cool. Thanks for bringing that to the table, Sophie. When you're the education secretary, you can put that into place. Change the system.
I'll be fixing maternity pay first. And then
yeah.
And paternity leave, obviously.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, extend our 2 weeks off. Right. I think we're coming up to on our end 2 hours of recording here. It's been an amazing conversation.
It's flown by, honestly. I had such fun. Thank you.
No, thanks for coming on again. You're our first return guest. Dylan was extremely excited to announce that you're our first return guest earlier on,
Well, I feel
really lovely.
honoured.
You're honoured. You're honoured.
You are.
But no, thank you so much. Yeah. I realised as I said that makes me sound entitled, so I quickly moved on.
You are honoured. Damn right, you should feel good about that.
As in, I'm honoured by you.
It is. I knew what you meant.
Can I pull it back? Can I not look cringe here? You are honoured, and I shall knight you. Oh dear. Anyway, thanks so
Okay.
much for coming on. We look forward to our third episode. Maybe next year. We'll just make it a yearly thing. You come on every year.
I'd love that.
And
Absolutely.
like you said, we'll get to find out what's in the future for us, for you. Thanks so much, Sophie. And we'll chat
Thank
soon.
you for having me.